I recently went to Jagex HQ to playtest the Necromancy skill, and in today's video I'm going to share my experience to provide some context as to what I did and how it all worked. So whenever you're ready, grab your cup of tea, sit back, relax, and enjoy. So somewhere around mid-April, I was asked in a private channel in the content creator Discord if I wanted to go to Jagex to playtest the Necromancy, and of course, I said yes. Now in total, I believe 12 or 13 content creators were invited, but only 9 were able to make it and actually go there. Fast forward to around a week before we needed to leave, we received a full-fledged trip guide in our email inbox containing everything we would ever want to know about traveling to Cambridge. It even included tips such as needing to press the buttons to open the train doors, as they don't open automatically for those unfamiliar with those English trains, places to eat and have a drink. I mean, the guide had not 1, not 2, but 8 different pubs listed, which I found quite ironic considering we only really had 1 day of free time, but cool nonetheless. What I liked most about the trip guide is that we knew what we were going to do every single day down to the hour, so props to Jagex for setting up such a professional document. The journey to Jagex was fairly simple on my end. All I had to do was take a long train to the airport in Amsterdam called Schiphol, and at that airport I was able to meet my first content creator of this trip called Chivalric, who is also Dutch like myself. We got through customs quite quickly as we checked in beforehand using the online checking tool, and an hour or two later we were on our way to England. And for those of you wondering, Jagex was paying for the flight, train tickets, hotel, and pretty much all food expenses we were going to make during this trip, but the only thing we actually paid for ourselves was to sit next to each other in the plane, which wasn't all that expensive and definitely worth it. I'd like to clarify that we did not discuss our merging plans in the plane. Once we landed, we grabbed some of those triangle sandwiches for lunch and then headed to the train to go to Cambridge. Now the hotel Jagex booked us in Cambridge was quite literally like 1 or 2 minutes walks away from the train station, so it didn't take us long to pull up to the hotel, then check in and basically wait until other content creators arrived. This wasn't a big deal though, because the hotel was quite fancy considering that they could have just as easily put us in a 1 or 2 star hotel, but they didn't, and a couple of hours later, I and the 8 other content creators who were invited were hanging out in a pub near the train station. And this was an incredibly fun experience to meet a bunch of other creators in person, because I've never gone to a RuneFest, and I don't think I've never met up with anyone from Runescape IRL. Of course, players that I know IRL already that play the game, I've met, but I've never met anyone from Runescape, so meeting a bunch of creators, hanging out, having some lunch, a drink or two, was a very cool experience. I honestly felt like every single creator there was almost exactly like how they are on stream or on video or when talking to them on Discord, so it felt completely natural to talk to them and hang out with them in a pub. Now it wasn't just us creators, as Mod Shogun joined us and later Doom and Huli also joined us, and let me tell you, these are some lovely people to hang out with. Now there isn't that much more to say. The first day was basically us meeting each other and getting some rest from the journey, especially those people coming from Canada, as they were completely destroyed by jet lag. Day 2 started off with all of us eating breakfast at the hotel before being taken to Jagex by Uber, checking in, and then the presentation started in the Jagex auditorium. These presentations consisted of information about Jagex's direction and plans, and of course a lot of information about the Necromancy skill. Well-known moderators such as Mod Mike, Timbo, and Ryan did most of the presentation, but there was also a dozen developers inside the room and other Jagex related staff that mentioned what they were doing and how they were involved with Necromancy, which is really cool to see. And of course, we had some time to meet the developers in between sessions as well. And let me tell you, someone saying which one of you is Protox and then shaking your hand because they've watched some of your content is an amazing feeling, to say the least. After some of the presentations and showcases, we had lunch, and then we had a Q&A session inside the auditorium to ask questions before we started the playtest. and then the fun started. I believe we had a good 5 solid hours of playtesting, and during that time we were taken very seriously and for good reason. The devs were incredibly involved and basically on speed dial, walking around and asking us questions, taking notes, grabbing laptops to explain design thoughts and decisions, reasoning and all that kind of stuff. They were about as involved as they physically could be, which really showed their commitment to this playtest. Now, I'm not sure who told me this, I kind of forgot, but Mod Ryan is apparently a difficult person to get a hold of because he's so busy, so to have him there basically the entire time was awesome. During that playtest, I mainly tried to understand the core fundamentals of the skill while taking my time and taking notes, so I didn't have all that much feedback straight away as it needed some time to sink in, but I did ask plenty of questions and the J-mods were able to help me right away. After the playtest, we went to a pub a lot of J-mods go to, and then after that we had dinner at a fairly fancy restaurant with a few less J-mods, but still a bunch of J-mods nonetheless, and for some reason that restaurant was playing audiobooks in the bathroom. Really strange. Day 3 comes around, same thing, breakfast in the hotel together, Uber to Jagex, and way more time to playtest Necromancy. We had way more time than expected. We basically had the entire day until like 5 PM to playtest Necromancy, with the only real break in between being a lunch and the opportunity to do a Necromancy panel where a bunch of creators would interview developers together and be interviewed one-on-one. Now, I only went for the one-on-one interview where Jagex would be asking you questions about your experience playtesting Necromancy, and I've got to say that was quite the experience because I've never been interviewed in person with lights shining on your face and sitting on some kind of illuminated chair, so it was a bit awkward because I usually like to prepare what I want to say, but then, you know, it wouldn't be an organic interview with me answering questions ad hoc, essentially. I feel like I could have had a bit more fluid answers if I took a little bit of time to prepare myself for that interview, but hey, I did it. Let's see what they use of it in a future video. What I also really liked about the second play session is that Mod Jack came around with his laptop to ask questions about the skill and future changes using his post-it boards you might have seen during his Designing RuneScape livestream series. He seemed even more passionate about RuneScape in person, and it has to be one of my favorite conversations of the trip as it created a unique understanding of how they were approaching Necromancy. At the end of the third day, we had a big boardroom meeting in which questions were asked in a circular rotation as a sort of final verbal feedback session. There are definitely some things that needed changing or improving, more specifically the tutorial and some combat things, but the general consensus did seem to be that the skill so far seemed solid. Following that boardroom meeting, we went out to a nice rooftop bar with a bunch of the mods and then had dinner in the restaurant below straight afterwards. Now, we did take plenty of group pictures, although I'm not going to share them in case someone doesn't like the way they look in said picture. Following dinner, we went back to the hotel for a couple more drinks at the J-mods until we were told to quite literally leave and move to the, upstairs lobby instead of the hotel bar because it was closing. It was definitely sleepy time for me, and I said my goodbyes to the J-mods and then headed upstairs to sleep. Now, because everyone had to leave at different times, we didn't get to eat breakfast with the entire group on day 4, but such is life. I still got the opportunity to say goodbye to people like my crew, RSky and Lucario, and then it was time for the long journey back home. Overall, this trip has been the experience of a lifetime. I got to play test an extremely exciting skill and development, had the opportunity to meet and hang out with more than a dozen of developers and J-mods that work on the game every single day, and got to meet fellow content creators. It feels like I now have a newfound connection to these people, yes, people that were previously just faces on my screen. I would like to verbally thank all the J-mods involved for being a part of this trip, and a special thank you to Mod Hooli for being the mastermind behind this entire trip. Seriously, it could not have gone any better, and I have even more respect for the guy than before because while he didn't seem too stressed about it at all in person, he did mention the entire ordeal not exactly being his normal work week, not being able to sleep and making sure that everyone was on their flights and on their way to Jagex, so he really cared, and that's something I think is worth a special thank you. With that being said, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, even though I'm probably pretty bad at storytelling and vlog type videos, but hey, I hope you enjoyed. Catch you guys in the next one. Peace.